Hello, good afternoon, dear teachers. It is a pleasure to see you one more time here. As every Thursday, we have the pleasure to share with you different ideas with our master's class. I'm super excited because I can see now that we have teachers from Antioquia, from Risaralda, and we want you to enjoy this master class. So remember that this master class is part of the Inspiring Teachers Strategy by the Ministry of Education and the British Council. And dear teachers, this is our sixth master class and the third one addressing to all our English professors from secondary. Okay, a lot of people now here on the YouTube. This is super exciting for all of us, and I want to welcome all the teachers who are on the YouTube channel right now, watching and enjoying. Remember to participate in the chat. We are going to be sharing with you different hashtags, so please make sure that you participate and you want to share with us different ideas related to our master class. Okay, so welcome once again to our master class, how to foster reading skills in teenagers through autonomous work. This is our master class, and before we start, we want to share with you this amazing video. With this video, you're going to get to know a little bit more about our masterclass. So please, teachers, enjoy this video.
How do your students react when you ask them to read in English? And why is it that they sometimes find it challenging? Well, did you know that your students need to be familiar with at least 85% of all vocabulary in the text in order to understand it? My name is Jovana Živković. I'm a language teacher and I'm very passionate about reading instruction for a very personal reason. I'm proficient in 3 languages, and guess how I learned them? Through reading. In this masterclass, we're going to talk about how to enhance autonomous reading in teens. We will talk about specific strategies that you can use to ensure that the text is age and level appropriate. We will also mention some strategies that you can use to engage your students in collaborative reading. Reading can be active and fun. Join us to learn how.
Wow, that was a very interesting video by our dear friend Giovanna. Now it's time to introduce myself. Good afternoon for everybody. My name is Jonathan Vela. I'm a teacher, trainer, and researcher, and I'm doing what I love doing, sharing with teachers. Okay, so it is time to see or to invite our guests. So the following people are going to be our teachers. Let's see. So our guest. Okay, our guest number 1 is my dear friend, my dear teacher, Pedro Jesus, from the School General Santander, Norte de Santander. Dear teacher Jesus, welcome to the masterclass. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon. Well, I feel very happy to be here with you. And this is a great opportunity to exchange my experiences as a teacher. I work in a public high school, General Santander, in Villa Rosario, north of Santander. And I feel very happy to be here.
And we are very, very happy to have you. Okay,
Thank you.
a lot of teachers from different parts of the country listening and watching. Another teacher, our next guest, is our dear friend Jennifer. Welcome, dear teacher Jennifer. How are you doing today?
Okay, so great. Oh, I am very excited to be here. I'm going to tell you something about myself. My name is Jennifer Cuellar. I am from Cali. My institution is Educación Educativa General Francisco de Paula Santander. I am a public oriented English teacher. I teach from 6th to 8th grade. It's a pleasure to share with you some strategies I use and to learn and exchange experiences with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I love your background. It is a beautiful background, teacher Jennifer. That wall, that reminds me of Pink Floyd, my favorite band. And of course, it is a pleasure for me to invite our professor, Joanna. Joanna is a professor at Los Andes University and an academic consultant for the British Council with a master's degree in pedagogy and language teaching. She is very interested in program evaluation and English for specific purposes. So it is my pleasure to introduce our dear friend and professor, Joanna. Hello, Joanna.
Hello, Jonathan. Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure.
And it is a pleasure to have you. So now that we are going to start, dear Giovanna, do you know something? Do you know something about Eco Universe? Something related to the Eco Universe?
I actually do, and I love Eco Universe, and I know that most of our teachers also love it. So why don't we show them a video?
Let's do it. So let's enjoy this video related to Eco Universe, and then we're going to go to challenges and opportunities. So enjoy the video, please.
Hola, hello. Queremos darte la bienvenida a un universo lleno de historias, juegos, actividades, radio, videos y muchos recursos. Esto es Eco 2.0. Eco significa English for Colombia y es un universo educativo compuesto por dos grandes estrategias, Eco Radio y Eco Web. ¿Qué es Eco Radio? Eco Radio es una estrategia que incluye dos programas de acuerdo a la edad de los oyentes. Para niños entre 6 y 11 años está Eco Kids, un programa de radio para aprender inglés recorriendo las riquezas naturales y culturales de Colombia. Para jóvenes y adolescentes entre los 12 y 18 años está Eco Teens, un programa que los motiva a construir sueños y proyectos a través del inglés. Ambos programas cuentan con personajes entretenidos y secciones atractivas para cada rango de edad.
Okay, so it is time to start with our first session, challenges and opportunities. Dear Joanna, are you ready?
This part, we are going to talk a little bit about challenges and opportunities that our teachers have in their classrooms. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and we're also going to hear Pedro and Jennifer, and we're going to hear about their experiences. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Okay, about the question.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you. Sorry, we had a bit of delay in the sound. I apologize for that. That happens when we're online. So I would like to ask you all a question, and this question goes for our teachers, Jennifer and Pedro, but also for all of you who are in our audience watching us on YouTube. So the question is, what has been the biggest reading challenge for your students? And for our teachers who are on YouTube, who are following us on YouTube, we are going to participate with a hashtag reading challenge. So for all of you there, type hashtag reading challenge. And while you post, I'm going to ask Pedro to tell us a little bit about the reading challenges that his students have. Pedro.
Sorry, I have a problem with my battery. So, sorry.
Or maybe while Pedro can get back, we can ask Jennifer.
Okay, well, so this is a great question. So because I think, well, the biggest challenge for my students is how to encourage students in to read a text without using Google Translator. So how they can enjoy the activity, how they can enjoy reading, and motivating to read out of the classroom. Maybe for me is the biggest challenge for my students to use different strategies to understand and enjoy the reading.
Very interesting, Jennifer. And I'm sure that many of our teachers who are watching us today have the same issue. Pedro, are you here with us?
Okay, I think the biggest reading challenge for my students is to try to understand the vocabulary, the syntax, the grammar, the language in general, because it depends on the level of the students. Some students have good vocabulary, some of them don't have good vocabulary. So the challenge is to try to understand the ideas and the paragraphs in the reading. So for me, it's difficult to try to develop skills with the students, and they have to try to learn vocabulary about reading, and it's difficult. It's a great challenge for them.
Thank you for sharing, Pedro. And what you both just shared with us is actually very connected because sometimes our students lack vocabulary. And the first thing they do is actually rely on a Google Translate or other translation tool to be able to cope or to deal with the text. I've had the same issues in my classroom. I believe that not having maybe the level or not being familiar with the vocabulary can indeed be a big issue. Jonathan, do we have anything on chat? What do our teachers say?
Well, number one, I want to tell you that we have more than 100 teachers right now
Wow.
watching and enjoying your master class. This is amazing. We have a lot of comments. We have friends from Quibdó, and we have friends from Risaralda, from Quindío. It's amazing. So I want to share with you this one, dear Giovanna, and with everybody. Luis Eduardo Salas, he says, my reading challenge is the poor strategies in language in Spanish and in English. Okay, that's number one. Mari Morales is speaking about to choose an interesting reading for my students because they love amazing and horror books. After reading, they expose with the best skills like role play. That's what Mari Morales is sharing with us. It's crazy, Joanna. You don't imagine how crazy the chat is right now. We have a lot of things. It's crazy, but we are excited. We are excited to have all our friends, our English teachers participating. I'm going to read the last one. Gladys Morales says, reading challenge when they can do the reading from known words and understand it, dear Giovanna.
Mhm.
I really like the comment about horror movies, and this is a very interesting topic because later on in our masterclass we will actually be talking about those specific topics that our students enjoy, and maybe how we can deal with that. Thank you for sharing, Jonathan.
No problem.
Well, if you're ready, let's go to our next question. So this is our next question. How do you encourage autonomous reading in your classroom? A huge challenge, right? Let's think about autonomous reading in and outside the classroom. And for our teachers in the audience, let's participate with hashtag autonomy. And while you all share your answers with us, I'm going to ask Jennifer to tell us a little bit about her classroom.
Okay, well, it's so difficult to encourage the students autonomous readings because even in Spanish, they don't like reading. So regarding English reading comprehension, I think the most important thing is encourage the students uh, to read about their interest, needs, and topics they enjoy. For example, I use Way2Go, and Way2Go you can find different topics, especially, for example, about the environment, about health, globalization, and I enjoy some of them. I try to use the different readings depends on the levels of the students. Yeah, first of all, the second one maybe you can focus on grammar and vocabulary and topics related to their own. For example, likes, music, singers, different topics. But but first of all, I think the most important thing when you decide the text is to give give the strategies to them in order to understand the text. After that, they can do it after the of the classroom.
I couldn't agree more, Jennifer. And it's very interesting how you mentioned that maybe this autonomous reading is indeed a challenge in both native language, or Spanish in this case, and also English. Pedro, how about you?
Okay, in my case, I give the students the opportunity to, for example, choose a reading that they like. And I take into account, for example, their preferences, their likes, and the topics in general for teenagers, because my students, most of them are teenagers. So they want, for example, to participate in readings about problems with adolescents and violence and most of the topics are related to teenagers. So I prefer to encourage the students with those kind of topics.
Thank you, Pedro. We again mentioned motivation, so let's keep that
Yes,
in
to
mind
motivate them. Yes,
because
exactly.
we'll be talking about that later on. And Jonathan, what do our teachers say in the audience?
Oh, you don't imagine, Joanna. But I'm going to read this first message. It says, listen to me. Giovanna is a very talented and experienced teacher. I can't wait to now to listen to all the things that she has to share with us. What do you think, Joanna? It's
Okay,
exciting.
thank you for that. They're so nice, yeah, to say
Yeah,
that.
yeah. We have another teacher from Apartado, and we have here her comment. It's reading is one of the skills that my students enjoy because they can explore characters, landscapes, and situations with the readings we use in class. So look at all the things, all the positive comments that our teachers have for all of us. Now related to the hashtag, they are still participating with the previous hashtag.
Okay.
But for example, Fanny Palacio, she wants to share with you and with everybody something related to a difficulty that she has. And she says, is to enhance my students toward the communicative approach. And Martin Castañeda says, hashtag autonomy. I encourage my students to choose and to bring readings focused in their own interest. So
Very
this is
interesting.
exciting, Joanna. They are
Yeah.
speaking about autonomy and students' interest. A
I,
Interest.
lot of comments.
I love I love how our teachers are so aware of the importance of motivation and autonomy and how the two go together. We'll be talking a lot about autonomy today, but I'll go to our next question. And this is the final question before we actually dive into the topic. And the question is, it's actually an instruction. Share one question you expect us to answer today. For our audience, you can post it on chat on YouTube. You can say hashtag my question and then post only one question you would like us to answer. It is super important because when we finish our master class today, we're going to go back to our questions and we're going to see whether we were able to answer it or them or not. And while our teachers post, Jonathan, I would like to ask you today if we can maybe save those questions for later. I will ask Pedro and Jennifer to share one question that they have for today.
Okay.
Pedro, would you like to share one question with
Okay.
us?
My question is how to improve reading skills in my students, especially for students of 11th grade, because they have to present the ICFES test. So some of them have problems with reading, and you know that reading is a difficult task for everybody. Reading is a most complex task. So the question is how to improve reading skills in my students.
Okay, that's a really good question. It's a tough question, but we will be talking about it today. And then Jennifer, what's your question?
Okay, my question is related to the topic. So, how to encourage students to read out of the classroom as a leisure activity, even in Spanish? Yes, leisure activity.
Mhm.
Interesting. So as we go and as we talk today, we'll be mentioning how some of the skills can be actually transferred from one language to another. So maybe we will also answer this question. I'll ask Jonathan. Jonathan, do we already have any posts on the chat? I know that we have a delay of 2 minutes while our teachers are like able to hear us, so maybe that will affect us a little bit, but. Jonathan, do we already have
Yeah.
some of the questions? Yeah.
I'm here. I'm here. Well,
Uh-huh.
we don't have questions yet, but I'm sure they are going to be writing. So we invite you all to number one. Remember to participate with the hashtag. My question is. We're going to save the question, dear Joanna, for the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And number
Yeah.
two, I want to take this opportunity, Joanna, to invite you, our teachers here and our teachers in YouTube, to sign, to participate, to go to the attendance. Remember, there's something that it says Colombia Aprende, and in there you are going to have your attendance to this wonderful and amazing masterclass, Joanna. Joanna, but we don't have questions yet. But would you like to know something about the last hashtag autonomy?
I definitely would.
Okay, so we have the first one, Joanna. It's Gladys Morales. Gladys Morales says autonomy, hashtag autonomy with the life of their favorite singers.
Wow, that's a good
Imagine.
idea.
It is an amazing idea. Another one, Joanna, autonomy. I would try first with steps, very motivational phrases, and finally with short paragraphs. So the teachers are excited, they are participating, they are sharing their ideas, and I'm going to be sharing or saving the questions for later. Okay, Joanna?
And they actually have some great ideas. They should be here with us.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, Joanna,
Okay,
did
so
you say that was your last question, or you have another
that
question?
was actually my last question, and I'm super ready to reveal the 3 techniques that we're going to see today. So if
Okay.
you agree, let's go to the next section.
So let's go to the next section, Joanna. Teaching.
Okay, and we are back and we are ready for our 3 teaching techniques. But before we dive into the techniques, I would like to tell you a little bit how it will all work. So today we're going to have special moments in our presentation, in our masterclass. And whenever you see this box, these will be the moments where I will invite you to participate, both our teachers, Jennifer and Pedro, and also our teachers in the audience. So whenever we have a thinking box, get ready to put your thinking hat on and to participate with us. And then also there will be some parts of our class today where you will see this light bulb and then the word tip. And this will be a very practical moment where we will reveal very practical strategies ready to use that you can take and bring to your classroom and use as they are in most of the cases, even without any adaptations. So the 3 techniques for today are: number 1, choose wisely. This is the name of our first one. Number 2, scaffold your reading. The second one, very related to what some of you were mentioning in the chat. And then number 3 will be collaborate to connect. We all love collaboration, right? And reading can also be collaborative, and today we're going to see how. But before we actually start talking about how we can bring these strategies into our classroom, we need to ask the question, how do we read? And what is actually autonomous reading? What does it mean? We might have different definitions of this topic. So I'll tell you how we read. There are different ways we can understand reading and see reading. There are different approaches. Some people read by first decoding letters, right? We first need to understand or decode letters. And then also we need to understand words. But then we also need to make sense of sentences. And then we also need to think critically and form opinions about or on the text. And this is something what Pedro was also mentioning about those reading strategies and taking, for example, standardized tests such as Saber 11. And what's interesting is that we sometimes think that it all goes bottom up, starting from decoding letters and then going to critically thinking. But sometimes in our like as we read, it will actually be mixed. So we will be doing the 2 processes, top down and bottom up, at the same time. And this is what makes reading extremely complex for our students and for us as well. Another thing that we need to understand about reading is this question: why do we read? You mentioned motivation, you mentioned horror movies in the chat. We all read for different purposes, right? And based on our purpose, we have different types of reading. And I'm going to tell you the 2 main types. So the first type, depending on the purpose, is intensive reading. And this means reading for an assignment. And here we read short texts. So when you read in schools, usually in our classes, in my classes as well, we usually do intensive reading. There's another type, which is extensive reading. And this reading is particularly interesting because it is reading for pleasure. This is where people actually read because they want to read. Sorry for the noise. And this is where we read books and novels or anything that's longer. It can maybe be even a blog, that our kids today, they have different tastes, different genres, maybe a little bit different than what we like. So in this extensive reading is where we actually read for pleasure. And this is where we want to get. We want all our kids, all our students to read for pleasure. Now, depending on what kind of reading you're doing, you will improve certain skills. So if you're doing intensive reading, you will most probably be improving critical thinking because you will have some questions there. Vocabulary, which is something that Pedro also mentioned, right? That we want to improve vocabulary. Also grammar. By reading, we also improve grammar, analytical skills, and general reading skills. Now, when it comes to extensive reading, we will improve reading fluency. We all want to be fluent when we speak, but also when we read. But you will also improve vocabulary because as you read, you will hear different vocabulary. You will learn it. You will see it in a context. This is where communicative approach comes in. One of our teachers, I think it was Gladys in the chat, mentioned that. So this is where you will also improve vocabulary. Now, what do we want to achieve? Well, in our classrooms and also outside our classroom, we want to mix the two. We want to make sure that our students are ready, equipped with strategies so they can do both intensive and extensive reading. And this is where autonomous reading comes in, because autonomous reading can be seen as independent reading, but then it can also be different. So for us today, autonomous reading will refer to engaging in reading activities for their own enjoyment or because of their perceived personal significance. This is where some of our teachers mentioned interests, right? We also mentioned motivation for reading. We mentioned that maybe they can choose what they want to read. And this is where autonomy comes in. When you can take charge for your learning, for your reading, and when you can make a choice about what you're going to read and also why you are going to do it. So today we'll be talking about both intensive and extensive reading, but we will look at it through this autonomous reading idea, okay? And now I'm ready to start with the first technique. And the first technique we said is choose wisely. And for us today, choosing wisely means finding an age and level appropriate text. And this is key if we want our students to be engaged. And here we come to our first thinking box. And here I would like to invite everyone in the audience to post their answers by using a hashtag choose wisely. And the question is, how do you choose text? What kind of reading materials do you use? And I'm going to ask the same question here in our group. So Jennifer, how do you choose texts for your classroom or for autonomous reading?
Okay, well, first, at school, I have different materials. For example, I have some books. These books were donated by British Council. There are different topics. It's stories about people, teenagers in different countries. It's about culture, and they enjoy it because the levels of the students is very important. And when they can learn, for example, about countries and culture, I try to choose these kinds of topics. Maybe topics about likes and biographies, depends on the levels of the students, or grammar and vocabulary. So what kind of materials? Okay, sometimes I choose real material, realia, for example, from magazines, from newspapers, and maybe books, some topics or some readings from the internet. So this is my material, and I try to adapt this text sometimes with different activities. So in order to engage the students in the activities you said now, for example.
So Jennifer just mentioned two very important things. One, she likes using authentic materials. I think we all love that, right? Because it's more real, students are more likely to be engaged. And then Jennifer also said that she adapts her material. So this is very interesting. We're going to go back to that in a moment. Pedro, how about you?
Okay, in our institution, we use the Ministry of Education books. This one, for example, English Please, 1, 2, and Way to Go. And those books are very, very useful because the students have the opportunity to download the book, and they have the books, for example, in the cell phones. And also we share, for example, if we are working in virtually way, we can share the screen and they can listen, they can read, they can develop the activities at the same time with the teacher. So these books are very, very practical. And also I use internet books and material, web pages, because we have different texts and we can choose the best one to the students according to the level, according to the age. Okay, so we try to use different kind of books and newspapers, magazines. Okay, my coworker mentioned that.
Thank you, Pedro. So we do have something in common, all three of us here, that we like authentic materials. But then also you mentioned Way to Go. I think that Jennifer also mentioned Way to Go in English, please. And those are really good resources for the classroom. Jonathan, do we? I think I'm also kind of peeking and looking at the chat on YouTube, and I see some comments there. Would you like to share some?
Well, so if you're watching the chat, you're going to be surprised with all the comments. They are speaking even about your dog. And they said that you have a beautiful dog.
Thank
Okay?
you.
So that's number one. Number two, we have a lot of teachers. For example, we have Fanny Palacio, and she says, I like to choose text that connect students with their culture. We have teacher
Wow.
Gloria Morales is speaking about penguin readers. Hashtag choose wisely penguin readers.
Mhm.
It is to say, dear Joanna and teachers, that our teachers, English teachers from the country, they are very wise at the moment of choosing the material.
They are.
Leonardo Monroy, he says, choose wisely with scaffolding techniques,
Wow.
fostering students' reading skills through scanning and skimming.
Mhm.
And I have another one. I want to share this one with you because the teacher Gladys Morales, she has been very
Very
active,
active. Yeah, Gladys is
very
super active
active.
on chat.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I know. And she says, hashtag choose wisely, depend on the competence. Readings from English, please, about the environment, about healthy habits, about famous singers. Dear Joanna, our teachers are very, very active. And I know that we don't have a lot of time, dear Joanna, but I have a lot of questions. Remember your hashtag my question. And we have a lot of questions now. Whenever
Mhm.
you want to listen to one, I can share with you one question.
Why don't you share
And
one now before we go
okay,
and continue? I
okay,
would love to hear one. Uh-huh.
okay. Listen to this one. It says Martin Castañeda, hashtag my question. What strategies, dear Joanna, can we use about reading when students are pessimistic about this skill?
I love this
And
question.
I
Such a
know,
good
I
question.
I knew that you were going to enjoy this one. And one more, teacher Boris Piñeres has been very active, and his question is how to enhance intrinsic motivation in teenagers towards reading. Joanna,
Well,
Joanna,
I think that I'm going to give an answer to that one in basically 3 minutes because we are just
nice,
going to talk about that. So if you agree, I'll
nice.
continue. And let's bear in mind those two questions, intrinsic motivation and how can we help students who are pessimistic about their ability because that's the biggest challenge, I would say. We can deal with language problems, we can deal with lack of proficiency, but if our students are not motivated, if they do not feel that they can do it, this is a real problem that we need to deal with. And this is how we can do it. So the most important thing is to see reading as a multidimensional activity. And here we refer to several things. So first, motivation, key for reading. Second one is difficulty. Then we have feelings, which we cannot uh, ignore. And you had a very interesting talk. I think it was your first masterclass where you actually talk about emotions and feelings in language learning. And then we have language acquisition. So what do we have here? So in motivation, we have all those wants and all those interests, and we need to think about why our students read. Why would they want to read this text? Or what kind of text would they like to read? And what is it that motivates our students? It can be a horror movie, as one of the teachers said, or maybe it can be something about music or something about fashion or something about saving the environment or dogs. Whatever it is, we need to think about that motivation before we actually choose reading. In reading, intrinsic motivation is everything. And I would say in learning as well, because as much as we try to motivate our students by external factors, it is only going to work for a certain period of time, for a moment in the classroom, and that's it. But it's not going to be for their lives. And we want to make sure that they're intrinsically motivated forever. And by choosing maybe text or asking ourselves, what are they interested in? We might increase their intrinsic motivation. The second one is difficulty, and this refers to the level of difficulty of the text. If a text is too difficult, students will struggle, right? And then maybe we can help them deal with some of the things. But if we're talking about autonomous reading, if they're alone with the text and the text is too difficult, they're going to be, as our teacher said, they're not going to believe that they can do it. And this can be a huge obstacle in the learning process. The next one is feelings. Some texts have certain impacts on our students, and we need to choose the texts that make our students happy, that can motivate them, that have those positive emotions. So when we choose topics, it is very important to think about the impact that the text will have on our students. And finally, language acquisition. Sometimes we read for pleasure. Sometimes we read because we want to learn about a topic, right? Something like content. But sometimes we read only because we want to learn new vocabulary. So when you design your activities, you need to make sure that you know what you're planning to do in this class. Do you want to develop vocabulary? Do you want to increase maybe fluency in reading? Or you want students to read for pleasure? Depending on each one, you will choose different texts, okay? They're very, very, very different. Now, when you choose wisely, you have to think about two things. One, as we said, motivation for reading. And two, we need to think about text difficulty. And let's see how it works. So I go back to intrinsic motivation, which is definitely the most important thing in reading. And what we need to make sure is that what we are bringing to the classroom is in line with their intrinsic motivation. So instead of being like, I'm a teacher and I need to motivate my students, what can I do? And this becomes a struggle for us teachers. I'm sure that there are many teachers there who are like, how can I motivate my students? Sometimes it is impossible. So one solution is motivate them by making sure that what you're bringing to the classroom is meaningful for them. And this is where their intrinsic motivation will do the job. Okay? So what do we have here? There are three studies on reading mentioned three aspects. One, self-concept and value of reading. Boys read different than girls. Boys like different topics than girls. And we can see this starting from third grade. They start being different, right? Everybody is different. We have to respect those gender differences or age differences. So we need to make sure that what we are bringing is valuable for our kids. Number two is the choice. Students who can choose between even small tasks or texts are more motivated. If you let them choose, one of the teachers in the chat said, I let them choose which book they want to bring, or I let them choose which text to read. So even if you make like a tiny choice, offer them 3 texts and tell them you can choose, they will immediately be more intrinsically motivated. And then read aloud and have discussions. Don't just have them sit and read, but engage them actively, and they will immediately be more motivated. Now, there's a question here that teachers can say, like, how can I let them choose if I have to follow a curriculum? or if there are certain learning goals that we need to reach. This is all true. We need to reach the goals, we need to follow the curriculum, the objectives, etc. But there are still small things that we can do. And here is the tip I'm going to give you. Remember our light bulb? We got to our first tip. So the tip is, if you're working, for example, with a suggested English curriculum and you're following certain theme, and you can maybe not ignore that theme, you need to follow it. What you can do is have that interest center, which is the theme, sustainability, and then within the sub-theme, you're going to have maybe fast fashion. You can brainstorm ideas with your students and ask them, what about fast fashion, or what about this big theme, which is sustainability? They would like to know more. So it's as simple as that. Ask them, brainstorm. How can you brainstorm? Well, you can draw on the board a very simple chart like this one. And you can, as a teacher, you can suggest certain topics. So you can say, okay, would you like to read about how clothes is produced in fast fashion? We're here talking about 11th grade. This can apply for every grade, depending on which curriculum you follow. Hopefully suggested English curriculum, which is very easy to follow. Or you can say, what about child labor or pollution? Do we produce more pollution with fast fashion? And then ask them to suggest. Ask them to tell you a couple of topics. And then within those themes, you will be able to find texts. This saves you time if you think about it, because sometimes we spend hours thinking like, which text can I bring? What should I do? But if you turn it around, if you make your students more actively engaged, you will see that they will have some very interesting suggestions. Now, number 2 is level of difficulty. And here I have a question for Jennifer and Pedro. Jennifer, Pedro, can you read this text?
No, I can't.
No? Why not?
No, because I can understand the written words or the lyrics, or I can
I don't
understand.
know. Yeah, I don't know what language is, so it's difficult for us.
Difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Mhm.
It
Is
is
Serbian?
difficult.
Is Serbian maybe?
It is not Serbian. I think that the alphabet, I will tell you why we cannot read it. The alphabet is, I think, Greek, but the words itself, are actually in English.
In English.
And for example, why can't we read it? We can't read it because we basically are not familiar with the alphabet, right? And this is something that happens to our students. So when they see a text, when we give them a text that they are unfamiliar with, that they don't know the vocabulary, they are like this. They see this and they're like frustrated. They don't know how to continue. And we don't want this, right? What you see on the screen is actually Little Red Riding Hood. And it's a story, right? It says Once Upon a Time. So it's a story about Little Red Riding Hood. But the simple fact that we have this alphabet makes it difficult for us to read. And this is where we come to level of difficulty. And this is something we don't want. We don't want our students to feel like this just because they don't know the vocabulary. So what's the answer? Here's the answer. So there are 3 levels of reading, and this is very important for us teachers. The first level is frustration level. Nobody wants to be here. I'll tell you what it is in a moment. The second one is instruction level, and the third one is independent level, which is the most fun one, right? So the first one we frustrate, the second one we kind of need help, and the third one is independent level. Everything flows. And let's see how it works. So for the frustration level, students need to know 1 in 10 words. Students need to be familiar with at least 9 words. So they can have 1 unfamiliar word in 10. What does this mean? And you saw it in our pitch today, right? In the video. Less than 85% of the words are familiar. 85% of the words are familiar, right? And there is I'm confused. So less than 85% of words are familiar, and there is frustration because we don't understand the text, right? And this is what you mentioned as when students don't know the vocabulary, this is what happens. In the instruction level, no more than 1 word is difficult. So in this part, we have 85% of correct word recognition, meaning that our students take the text and they know at least 85% of the vocabulary. Only 15% is unfamiliar. And this means that they will understand the text with approximately 75% of comprehension. And the last one is that no more than one in every 20 words is difficult. And at this level, they have 90% reading comprehension. Now, I want to ask you, where do you think your students are? Frustration, instruction, or independent when you read in school? Pedro?
Well, in my case, sometimes the students feel frustrated because they don't know exactly the vocabulary. So the strategy that I use is I give keywords about the reading. Sometimes I give, for example, main ideas, secondary ideas of the reading, and I try to motivate because I consider motivation is very, very important. And the students consider that reading is boring sometimes, so we have to
That's true.
motivate them and try to help them to develop the activities and to try to develop a good reading comprehension of the test.
Perfect. That's true. So if your students are frustrated, it is most probably that they know less than 85% of the words in the text. And this is
Yes.
very easy to happen, right? Because 85%
And they don't develop
is a
the
lot.
activities. They don't develop because
True.
they feel frustrated because they don't understand anything.
Very good. So it's a vicious cycle. One problem leads to
Yeah.
another. So we
That's
don't want them to be at the frustration level, okay? We want them to be either at instruction level, where they know 85% of the vocabulary, meaning that 15% will be unfamiliar. So what is our goal for the reading? To learn 15%. And
Okay.
everybody can learn 15%, but you cannot learn 85% from one reading. So what we need to make sure is that when we give a text to our student, and I will now tell you how, I will give you a tip. When we give a text to our students, we need to make sure that they know at least 85%. If they know less, they will feel like what our teacher said in the chat. They will feel frustrated. They will be like, I will never understand this. This is too difficult. And I'll go back to our picture here, and this is how they will feel. And this is something we don't want. Now, if you want your students to read independently, they need to be at the independent level. So you need to make sure that the book you assign or the book they choose has more than 90% of familiar vocabulary, so they can read for pleasure fluently without being confused. So for
Excuse
this,
me, Joanna.
Pedro, go ahead.
And another thing is that we have to choose a good topic for them because sometimes they don't like some kind of topics. And for example, imagine we have children and choose a reading about the space or about planets. Maybe they lie at the beginning, but when they try to understand or to develop the vocabulary, they don't understand because we have technical vocabulary in the reading. So we have to take into account the level of the students and what kind of reading they would like to develop. So it's important for me.
I agree, Pedro. So it's those two. Jennifer, what do you say? What level are your students usually at, and how do you deal with that?
Okay, definitely when they read that text, they feel frustrated. So, okay, at the beginning, when I start with using introducing books in the classroom, at the beginning for them was so very frustrated, and I have myself, I have, and maybe I have now, even some mistakes in order to choose what is the book for them. Yeah, but now I can say my students can feel more motivated in order to read and understand a text step by step. My idea is they can choose a book by themselves and they can understand the text. So for that reason, it's so very important how you can give the instructions level to the students. For example, if you use, for example, scaffolding, it's very important. Skimming or scanning vocabulary inferences, synonyms and antonyms. My math, for example, I try to use this my maps. It's so very important. It's a great activity for them when they read, for example, texts about expositive text, scientific text, science text, math text. Regarding these topics is very important. So when they are very confident about reading, they can be very independent. That is my opinion.
Mhm.
I agree, Jennifer. And in a moment, we will be talking about exactly those strategies that you just mentioned that are very valuable. So to wrap up this one, so what we want to achieve is that students know at least 85% of vocabulary. And you usually know where your students are at. You may have students in 11th grade that are A1 level, and you will have others that are B1 level. We usually get a mixture of students, right? Not everybody's at the same level. So maybe a text that I have in, for example, way to go for certain grades or English, please, although it is for that grade, maybe the level will not be appropriate because some of my students will not reach the level. So even when you work with texts from textbooks, which are great and we should use them, make sure that you analyze them and make sure that at least 85% of vocabulary is familiar. And this is how you can do it. I'm going to give you the first tip for this strategy or this technique. The tip here is to use text analyzers, and I'm going to give you one. You're going to receive it in the materials after this masterclass. And the tool is called Road to Grammar. And what this text does is the following. So as you can see in this video, you can, for example, decide on a topic you want to teach, for example, fast fashion. So you go online, you look for texts that you like, whatever you like, authentic, something that you know your students will like. And then you see the text, as you can see on my screen, and you decide which part of the text you like and which part of the text would you like to bring to your classroom. You copy it. Of course, be careful. You don't copy the photos. Just copy the text until where you want to. And then you copy paste that into Road to Grammar. When you copy there and you click on submit, the analyzer will tell you the level. Check this out. Authentic text C2 level. Our students cannot read C2 level, right? It's way too difficult. So what you need to do is look at the number of words it has, look at the length, sentence length, right? How long is the sentence? Long sentences are difficult. And then look at this vocabulary here. This suggested vocabulary is the vocabulary suggested for C2 level. So check it and think about whether your students are familiar with it, whether it's too difficult, and you can replace it in the text. You can replace it for an easier word, and this is how you adapt texts. And then also think about cognates. Sometimes a word seems difficult, and it might be difficult for me because I'm from Serbia, but for a Spanish speaker, it's not difficult because it's a cognate and it sounds exactly the same in Spanish. So next time you are going to, you decide to adapt materials, use this Road to Grammar text analyzer, replace all difficult words with easy words, and then make sure that sentences have no more than 12 words. And when you do that, your students will immediately be from frustration level to the instruction level. And not only will they enjoy it, but they will also be able to acquire the vocabulary they do not know. And this is where we finish this first technique, and we are ready to go to the next one. And our next technique is scaffold reading skills, just like Jennifer just said. And this is how we do it. So, scaffolding. According to the definition, scaffolding is providing temporary support until someone or something is ready to stand on its own, like when we build a building, right? So you have a building, you need scaffolding. Once the building is ready, you remove scaffolding and it stands on its own. But what does it mean in reading? In reading, it means providing temporary support until students are ready to read on their own, until they do not have language or reading problems at a certain level. So as Jennifer was saying, and now I'm going to ask you also a couple of questions, we need to first help them with, number one, we need to choose text, right? Like we said here. And then even when we make sure that the text is not too difficult, we make sure that we provide temporary support by helping them with strategies or by giving vocabulary, etc. And this is where I would like to hear our audience as well. The hashtag this time is iScaffold4. And the question is, think of your students which language or reading problems should we scaffold for in or outside of our classroom? And I'll ask Jennifer and Pedro until our audience manages to post. Jennifer, what do you say? What are the language and reading problems?
Well, so students, they have so many problems, right? But maybe, okay, regarding my experience as a teacher, students, they have many problems with vocabulary. And maybe for that reason, they need to use the Google Translator much of the time, yes? So maybe the idea is to introduce how they can recognize the vocabulary regarding the text, the context, yes? And second one, maybe grammar, because depends on the levels of the book or the reading you choose previously. And the most important thing is to recognize which of them can do the activity by themselves and who of them can need my help or assistance help. Yes, because maybe sometimes some students can do it by themselves, but the other ones, hey, I need help, teacher. So you are you say now, for example, support. Yes, support. That is the idea.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing. I agree with you. I have the same issues in my classroom. Pedro, how about you?
Okay, I think the students have many problems, but one of the most important problems is that they don't have the habit to read. And imagine in Spanish, they don't have the habit to read. Imagine in English. So they don't like to read. So we have to force the students to read, but it's difficult because they don't like. And when they don't understand vocabulary and they don't understand, for example, grammar structures or ideas or expressions, they don't like to read. So it's difficult. It's difficult in our high schools because most of them prefer easy readings. And when they have, for example, long readings, they don't like to read.
Okay,
Definitely, we have to motivate them. But today, we hope to know more reading skills about.
okay, I agree, Pedro. Yeah, that's a huge challenge because we cannot force them, because by forcing we will not really help them start loving something. And then if they don't know the vocabulary or if the level is too high, it's even worse. And we're going to talk about it in a bit. Jonathan, do we have any interesting comments on the chat?
Very interesting comments, Joanna. Very interesting comments. But before I share with you one of them, I want to share this comment by teacher Daniel Cubillos. You know why, Joanna? Because he says, well, I'm not an English teacher, but in this master class, I found a good practice to teach English in my robotic class. Oh my
Wow.
God, Joanna, can you imagine this teacher implementing different reading strategies in his robotic class? So that is going to be amazing, Joanna. Don't you think so?
That's great, because it helps provide that cross-cutting themes and make a more transversal curriculum. Very interesting.
There you go. And then we have Professor Luisa Fernanda, and she says, hashtag I scaffold for reading comprehension issues, identifying characters, settings, and the author intentions.
That's a
Nice.
really good strategy.
Yeah,
That's
it
a
is
really
very
good
good.
strategy.
It is very good. Dora Eugenia says, I scaffold for irregular verbs related to grammar. Maricel,
Excellent idea.
yeah,
Excellent idea. That's related to grammar and vocabulary. Very good idea.
and you're going to be excited with this one. Listen, understanding the main ideas in short text, always related to the topics covered in class, paraphrasing, reading skills. This is just amazing, Joanna. There are too many comments that we could share that we want to share with you, but Joanna, I want to invite all the teachers who are on the YouTube channel, and you need to know that in order to obtain your certification, your certificate of participation in this amazing masterclass by Joanna, please connect or complete the registration code. If you don't know where you can find it, here in my cell phone, I want to share with you to the teachers who are asking right here where it says Colombia Aprende. You guys can click, and there you are going to register for participation. One more, Joanna, you want to know
Yeah,
one
let's
more?
do one more. I was also peeking here on my cell phone. You can notice me looking down because I
Yeah,
was so
yeah, I know, I
curious
know.
about all of those comments, but please share one more.
We have two very active teachers, teacher Boris Piñeres and teacher Gladys Morales. What do you want to know from Gladys or from Boris, Joanna?
Well, Gladys is becoming my favorite, so I want to hear
There
about
you go.
Gladys.
So Gladys Morales says, hashtag I scaffold for reading. Reading has a word bank and pictures related with the reading activities.
Excellent strategy. I love that one. And I'm going to actually now give you a couple of strategies related to that one. And
Nice.
this is how it works. So when we scaffold for reading, we can scaffold for language problems, reading problems, or content problems. Content problems are problems with prior knowledge. For example, if a student is not familiar with something and we give them the topic, like if you give me to read about robotics, as the teacher said, I will not understand a thing. I know the language, I don't have language problems or reading problems, but then if the content is unfamiliar, it becomes an obstacle, right? So this is something you need to be careful with. Also, language skills, like a vocabulary, difficult grammar, long sentences, and then at the end we have reading problems. So for example, if students do not have reading skills because maybe they do not read in their mother tongue, in their native language, maybe they don't read in Spanish, maybe they have not developed reading skills, then this is also something we need to scaffold for. What's important? Not to scaffold for everything in the same text. So for every class, make sure that you decide, okay, for this reading, I'm going to scaffold for lack of vocabulary and main ideas, for example. But don't do everything with one text because then it will become overwhelming, like that text that we saw. And you want to make sure that your students are making baby steps and also developing a habit for reading. So here I have a quote that I like that a friend shared with me. Students should read actively. When they're reading for information, they need to have tasks that focus their attention on the content. In time, these tasks will become habits. So this is where we want to be. We want them to read actively, to be interested in the content of what they're reading. This is why the text that you choose is everything. Because if students do not like the text, if they don't enjoy it, you can design the best worksheet ever. It will not work, okay? We want them to develop a habit. So if they have language problems, for example, you can do, for example, pre-reading activities. So you can pre-teach vocabulary. How do you pre-teach vocabulary? There are many ways. Some of the teachers mentioned some. So you can match definitions with words, for example, or you can play games such as Kahoot or other games or crosswords. And this is something you can do independently. This is something students can do at home. You can flip your classroom. And then when they get to class, you can cover the text. We usually do these activities in class, right? And this is something that doesn't really help. I mean, it does, but it becomes a little bit tedious for our students. So here I give you an example, and this is something we're also going to share with you in the materials for the masterclass. So you can create simple crosswords. We'll have them work in pairs. One student can have one crossword, other student can have another one. They do it at home, and then once they come to class, you can take it from there and you can do other activities. There are other things you can also do when you scaffold for vocabulary. For example, you can play games such as this one, roll a die for vocabulary activity. How does this one work? This one is super easy. So you play it like this. You have this worksheet that you see on the screen, and each number is something that students need to do, okay? So for example, number 1 is going to be define the word. Number 2 is going to be use the word in a sentence. Number 3 is going to be act it out. It becomes fun, right? 4 is give a synonym. Then 5, give an antonym. And then 6, draw the word. And then you can do it with dice in your classroom, which is fun, especially now because we're finally back in the classroom, so we can actually play those games. But if you don't want them to have any contact with dice or with each other because of the pandemic, you can also use the online, free online dice. Let me see if I can maybe share it with you here, and we can just do it once with, sorry, I cannot, here it is, sorry. We can do it with Pedro and Jennifer. What do you say? I'll roll it. I got number 3. And number 3 is acted out. And I'm going to choose a word. The word is going to be happiness. Jennifer, would you like to act it out? The word happiness?
Act it out. Yeah. Yes, yeah, it's a great activity. Yeah, act it out. I am not an actress, but I try to do it.
Okay, let's try. How would you act out happiness? What is happiness?
Happiness. Yeah, something like that.
Very good, Jennifer. Let's do one more with Pedro. Pedro,
Okay.
number 5. Number 5 says give an antonym or the opposite meaning. Let's take the same word, happiness. What's the opposite?
Sadness.
Very good. Excellent. And this is something you can do with your students. So you can play with vocabulary. And then once they start reading, you have to choose vocabulary carefully, of course. But once they start reading the text, that vocabulary will be easy for them. Now, you can also scaffold for pre-reading, content problems by giving pre-reading activities. For example, you can give them pictures. You can say, what do you see? This is activating their prior knowledge. And then you can ask them, what is this related to? How is this related to fast fashion? You will notice that I like topic sustainability and fast fashion. So the whole worksheet that we're going to share with you is about that topic, and it is following the suggested English curriculum. What else can you do? You can have reading problems. Pedro mentioned reading problems, right? Saberons, everything that we need to work with. So with reading problems, you can work pre, while, and post, like during the entire thing, at home, in the classroom, autonomously. And what you can do here is scheming, for example. So you can give students a text, and then you can teach them how to read a text, how to scheme a text, right? So you can tell them, for example, that they need to read only the first line of each paragraph, and that they need to match paragraphs with ideas. And then by teaching this in your classroom, they will develop a habit to do that. And then next time they read autonomously, their brain will immediately do that. So we first need to train them, scaffold, and then like that building that we saw, we start letting go, right? We remove scaffolding and their brains will do it immediately. How else can you scaffold for reading problems? Well, you can have activities for scanning. You can give them something and then ask them, okay, go back to the text and find these words. And this is where you start developing not only reading strategies such as scanning, but also high order thinking skills, because you can start playing with explicit and implicit information, right? And then you can also develop some extension activities, which can be discussions or it can be writing. Reading doesn't have to be only reading, because we read not for the sake of reading. We read for content, to be able to convey the message, to tell the story to somebody else, to learn something new. So reading is a very communicative activity if we design it well and if we make sure that it puts together in and outside the classroom. So you can ask them maybe to discuss something. They can read at home, right? They can come to your classroom and then you can only discuss it in the classroom. Or they can, for example, work on very brief writing tasks so you can integrate different skills. And this is very useful for post-reading activities. Now, we have our thinking box. How can scaffolding help to encourage autonomous reading? Here I'm only going to ask Jennifer because because of the time, and then the next question was going to be for Pedro. So Jennifer, how can scaffolding help you encourage autonomous reading? What do you think?
Autonomous reading a student to the reading, students can be better, because when they have the strategies, the different strategies, you can teach and you can give to them, so they can feel they can overcome the frustration they can feel at the beginning of the reading. So maybe at the end they can be more independent, more confident when they read a text.
This is
So
this is a
yeah,
great
for that
idea.
reason, step by step and depends on the levels of the students. Maybe in primary you can use these strategies then, and you can go scaffold step by step.
Very, very good idea, Jennifer. I agree. Scaffolding takes time. So you start scaffolding in the classroom, assigning small parts for independent or autonomous work. And then with time, everything that you scaffolded for, everything that you trained in the classroom will become their habit. And then they will be able to do it on their own. Now, what's important here? You first scaffold in the classroom to support autonomy, because that's why students have us, not to teach them, but to support their autonomous learning. Then you remove scaffolding once you have created a habit and once they have self-confidence, because if they're not self-confident, they're not going to read, right? And then at the end, you ask students to bring their reading choices to school. So many schools have, for example, English Day or Song Day or conversation clubs. Why don't we organize a reading club or a book club? And it can be not really reading in the classroom, but you can read at home and then bring your book, bring the blog, bring whatever students are reading at home and discuss it and have meaningful activities with that. And that is something that will improve intrinsic motivation. I have a question for Pedro. Pedro, in your school, do you have any kind of clubs?
Excuse me, can you repeat?
Of course. In your school, do you have any kind of clubs such as conversation clubs or English clubs, some extracurricular activities?
Sometimes we try to organize English clubs, conversational clubs, right? And the problem is the time because our students have to attend classes from 6 to 12, and in the afternoon we have another scheduled other students from 12 to 6. We don't have the time to organize English clubs. But when I was working in another institution, I do it. I did it. I did it. I organized English clubs, and it's a great opportunity because the students express ideas and they exchange experiences about the learning of English. And we do, for example, games in English. It's good. And sometimes we have the opportunity to learn songs, right? For example, a reading with a song and to complete the reading, the lyrics of the song. And it would be a good activity. And we did it in an English club. So
So I'm thinking that what you're doing with, for example, English clubs and conversation clubs, you can maybe integrate it in your classes, and then instead of, for example, us following maybe a grammar activity or something, we can have a conversation club during the class time about something they read at home. So because of course maybe students will not have time to attend any extracurricular activities, as you said.
yes, and we can combine, for example, grammar, vocabulary, games, songs, right, and dialogues, conversations. We can combine those kind of activities. The idea is to try to organize a group of students that they like English because we have, for example, 45 students in our classroom, and sometimes most of them don't like English. So we have only 15 or 10 students that like English, and with those students, we can organize the English club, for example.
What you can maybe do there is, if they don't like English, it's okay. We don't all have to like English, as not everybody likes physics, right, or math. But
Yeah,
you can maybe find a
other
topic that they
subjects,
like.
other
Yeah.
subjects.
You can ask them what they like and then ask them to read about what they like and bring that. So don't tell them you need to read a book. Tell them, what are you interested in? Well, I'm interested in becoming a stewardess, for example. So read about a life of a stewardess, and in our next class, bring that text and tell us a little bit about it. So these
Yes.
are just ideas on how we can let go a little bit of our control in our classes and then see if students can start loving it. And this is what we can do. This is how we can make reading an experience, right? Because if it's just go ahead and read, it's not really an experience for them. So I don't know, think of a fun name for a book club. let students choose. Tell them, okay, every Thursday at the end of the month, we're going to have a book club. Choose a fun name. Let them choose their readings and celebrate reading experiences. Make a board in your classroom where you have winners, like the people who read most blogs or most biographies this month, because there are plenty of genres out there that we can read. You can also do a book a minute. This is another useful strategy that you can use. And this is like 1 minute to convince their best friend to fall in love in a book or a blog or whatever they read. So you can tell your students, okay, read something at home, come to the classroom. For example, here we have Giovanna, Jennifer, and Pedro. I made this table. And then ask your students to tell the class about what they read. They cannot see the board, right? They tell the story. And then as they tell the story about the book they read or the blog or whatever they read, you will mark on the board whether they told you about the plot, whether they told you about the characters or the setting or similar book. And then you will have total points. You can kind of make it a competition for them. And they will enjoy it. And people who are listening will also pay attention to the board. And they will be like, okay, he already told me about the plot. And this is the setting, etc. And also what you can do, and here we go back to ECHO, right? Something that 15 days ago, you had a masterclass about the resources. So you can find graded readers, either on ECHO. Somebody also mentioned Penguin, right? So you can also use that. So you can organize those book clubs. You can find readers that are already graded, meaning they're already at a certain level, right? So you can find it on ECHO. There's a section called readers. You can choose some, offer several to your students, and then ask them to read it and bring something to the classroom. So it's always important to combine that autonomous part with the part that you do in your classroom. What's good about ECHO is that you can actually choose the level, as you can see on the screen. You can choose what you want to do. You will also be able to find, for example, lesson plans there that are only for reading, which are ready to use, and you can bring them to your classroom. So this is another resource we want to share with you today. And many of those will actually go with the audio, right, with the recording. So it also helps develop pronunciation. Okay, so that was about our two first strategies. So we had scaffolding. We just finished scaffolding, and now we're going to go to number 3, which is collaborate to connect. So we learned that the technique needs to be level appropriate, that it needs to be motivating, that we need to make sure there is not too much unknown vocabulary, that we need to scaffold, give pre, during, and post. We need to pre-teach vocabulary. And then once we do all that, we also want kids to connect. We want them to be active, right? And this is where we come to our next thinking box for all of us in the audience and also here. And I would like all of you to think about this. Reading is a receptive skill. We all know that, right? So is it passive? So the hashtag is #myths. And I'm going to ask Jennifer. Jennifer, is reading passive? What do you think?
Okay, so reading is a receptive, but it's not a passive skill. So because when you read a text, you need to include or to involve students in the other skills. For example, reading implies writing, speaking, and listening, right? For example, I have some books that they have audio, so for them it's easier. Sometimes they enjoy it more. Depends on the activities. For example, in scaffolding 4, you can involve all these different skills in the activities.
That's really interesting. And what you mentioned about the resources that you're using is super useful. I guess that many teachers out there also have similar resources. Jonathan, we forgot about our audience. What do they say on the chat?
Well, I want to tell you something. As you were discussing, as you were talking, as you were interacting, our dear teachers were doing exactly the same. For example, I'm going to give you here some information. We have Sergio Eidel, the Master of English, and he says, I am a teacher and a technician, system technician. And then the interaction. There was a very nice I mean I don't know how to say this because then we have another teacher. The teacher, well, I don't know how to say the name, OMOA, and says, "Dear teacher Sergio, what has been your experience with relation to learn English and your profession and the reading comprehension? So your master class has been so interesting that teachers are even discussing, having a conversation in the chat related to this." Joanna, how do you
I,
feel? How do you
I
feel
love
about
that
it?
because we are collaborating, and that's the spirit here. And
It
maybe
is.
while they'll post more, I'm going to ask Pedro. Pedro, what do you think, and what do you notice in your classroom? Is reading passive or active?
I think reading, in my opinion, reading is active because you can express feelings, emotions, thinkings. It's another way to express ideas, but you use the language in a written way, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like to speak by words and written words. So for me, it's active, very active. Language is connected with the reading all the time for me.
I agree, and we actually read to dig out meaning from the text. I'm going to continue, but Jonathan, if there's anything interesting, if you wish to interrupt me, go ahead.
Yeah, of course, of course. Remember that our teacher Boris Piñeres,
Mm-hmm.
has been
Boris, uh-huh.
very, very, very active, and he says, "Listen, hashtag myths. Reading is not a passive skill because it helps to improve critical thinking on the students." How about that, Joanna?
I couldn't agree more. It's true because critical thinking is everything but passive.
It is. It is true. It is true. This is super exciting. And remember, our dear teachers who are watching, who are listening, remember that in order to obtain your certificate of participation in this master class, please complete your registration by scanning the code. Okay, Joanna, thank you. And thank you to all the teachers who are participating.
Okay, let's continue. So we get the meaning from the text, and if reading were passive, it would be like this: like I sit down, I read the text, and I wait for the text to tell me the story, and then all the meaning goes into my head, and I kind of understand it, right? But that's not really what happens. So struggling readers who are not good readers, read passively. They read words and they expect the meaning to reveal itself. Like, I'm going to read word for word, continue, and then at some point, the meaning will reveal itself. And this is not something we want to do. So reading is active because if when we read, certain information gets to our brain and then we miss certain information. And let's see why we miss it. We miss it because we don't ask questions. And autonomous readers read with questions in mind, even in a foreign language. And this is something we want to develop in your students. Develop questioning and develop curiosity. When kids are small, they're all curious. I guess that many of our many of our teachers in the audience have children. And what kids do is ask questions. What is this? Why do you do that? When do you do that? And this is how they learn, but asking questions. But then when we grow up or when we start going to school, we sit down like this and we wait for our teacher to ask questions and we answer, ask questions and we answer. And this is where we become being very passive. And this is something we want to change. We want to be as curious and as active in asking questions as kids are. And we want to do it even when we read. How can you do it? First, we need to help students acquire vocabulary for life. We need to teach them strategies to acquire vocabulary. We need to train them in reading strategies, as our teacher said. So we need pre, during, and post activities. We train them in reading strategies, and then when they read autonomously, they will apply the same reading strategy. They will skim, they will scan, they will look for the main idea, etc. Ask questions in class, super important. I will give you a tip for that in a moment. Assign guided reading at home. Start with guided reading. Start with worksheets or with a couple of questions and let them choose a text and answer those questions. And then the final step is ask students to choose what they read autonomously. But we cannot expect them to not read at all and then next day they will read autonomously. So it's a journey. And as teachers, we can help our students get there. So we help them. They're basically learning to learn and learning to read, and they will transfer those skills from English to Spanish. Like, it can work in both ways. How can we do that? So train them to ask questions until they develop a habit. And this is how. Start with a simple game. This is a tip, okay? Start with a simple game. Ask your students, I have something in my bag. What's in my bag? And then they will say, most probably, is it a wallet? Is it a notebook? But these questions are not good. Yes, no questions are never good. What we want them to do is to use questions like this. What do you use it for? What color is it? And then I say, okay, it's black, and I use it to keep my money in there. And then students will say it's a wallet. So this is a speaking activity, right? But this is just to kind of activate their brains and to start them to ask questions. The next step will be for them to ask questions about reading. So when you understand better when you ask better questions. And this is very important for reading. And this is an activity I have for you. So you can ask them to ask questions before, while, and after reading. You can give them a worksheet like this, tell them, choose a text about your famous person, the famous person you like, your favorite singer, and write the questions before, write the questions while you read, and write the questions after. So they prepare questions for autonomous reading. You give them control. It's not you asking questions. It's them taking charge of their reading. And you can give them even a simple table like this, a chart. We will share this with you in the materials after this class. So you can ask them, okay, these are the questions I have before reading. These are the questions that emerge during reading. And these are the questions that I have after reading. And this is very similar to that strategy that we use, What I Know, right? QWL strategy. It's very similar, just this one is for reading. Another thing you can use is summarizing. Some of our teachers mentioned summarizing in the chat. So let's go back to our topic, fast fashion. Remember the text about fast fashion. So you can ask your students to summarize information. Jennifer mentioned mind maps, right? So this is a very useful strategy. Give them a chart, define certain topics, and then tell them to read the text. They can read it at home or in class, however you feel more comfortable, and depending on the level of your students, and then ask them to fill out the chart. Now, what they can also do is a jigsaw activity. Jigsaw activities are, if you remember, when certain students read certain parts of the text or cover certain information, and then they have to get together and they kind of put it all together. So here you can divide your class in 4 groups. You can give them the same graphic organizer or the diagram, and then each group will only read one part of the text. Or you can make it even more fun. Ask them to look for information online. Give them that freedom. Let them do a web quest and ask them to fill out the chart. Once they get to the classroom, they will share. What are we developing with this? This is not just reading for the sake of reading. It's fun, but it's also them reading with questions in mind, because they're like, okay, I need to learn about origins of fast fashion. How can I do that? Well, I have to read about it, and I have to look for information about it. And then they can also share, collaborate, help each other by sharing information. And this is digging for meaning or being curious. And it's not just reading and waiting for the text to tell me what's going to happen. It's also about you looking for specific information in the text. And what do we get from this? We transfer strategies from L1 to L2, but also from L2 to L1, because if they develop a habit for reading in English, they will most probably also improve reading in Spanish, because as you know, there is such thing as transfer of literacies, and it goes both ways. And then also, once they master the reading skill, they will feel more confident, they will not be frustrated, and they will develop love for reading. And this is where I finish with our third strategy, which is collaborate to connect. Jonathan, how are we doing on the chat?
I guess you can see my face. This is my happiness face. I'm so excited because I'm going to share with you and with everybody those comments. I know that we're going to move a little bit back with the hashtag myths, but listen to this. Leonardo Monroy says, hashtag myths, reading is difficult. False. So it's exciting. And then we have more comments like Lina. Lina has been very active and she says, "Poof, thanks, amazing, wonderful, good strategies. Thanks for this master class. Excellent. Hashtag Leonardo Monroy says, hashtag myths down. Reading aloud helps our students to get confidence. Dear Joanna, I love the idea of the book club. Excellent, lovely. Oh my God, Joanna, I don't know. The last one, Dejanira, she says, hashtag myths. Reading is difficult. I don't think so, because reading is a skill for the human beings. I don't know, Joanna, if you are feeling as excited as I am with all the comments that we are reading in the
I sure
chat.
am. And I love that we're all at the same page on the same page, but we're also learning from each other because everyone here brought some very interesting strategies. So it's all coming together perfectly. Well, Jonathan, I don't know what you think, but I think that we should go to the action steps.
Yeah, let's go to the action steps. Action.
Okay, we're back. So, action steps, get ready, teachers, because we're going to put everything together. We're going to tell you what to do next. And then something fun, we're going to go back to the questions you asked at the beginning. So, action step 1, talk to your students. This action step is related to our first technique, if you remember. So here, what we want you to do next time you teach is ask your students what they like to read about. And then also use the link, which we will share with you, Road to Grammar, to check the text difficulty. What will you achieve with these two? First, you will ensure that the text is not too difficult, because if it is too difficult, it doesn't matter how fun it is. If I don't understand it, I will not be able to read it. So make sure it's no more than 85% of unfamiliar words, and then also make sure that it is about something that your students actually like. And here I have a question for Jennifer. Jennifer, which topics would interest your students? Next time you teach, what do you think? What would they like to read about?
Well, so my students, maybe they like to read about culture topics. For example, I'm gonna share very short an experience with a book, a New Zealand adventure, and they love it because they didn't know anything about New Zealand. I try to introduce New Zealand, where it's located, where located is. So it was very interesting for them. And they learn about culture, Haka movements, and song. Maybe they like to topics about soccer, about sports, biographies about musicians, movies, and superheroes. Yeah,
Yeah,
depends on the
superheroes are
level,
always
depends
fun.
on the ages of the students.
Very good. So next time we teach, and this is for our students in the audience, ask your students what they want to read about. Let them choose. Let them choose, for example, what we read about on Tuesday, or what they're going to read at home, and bring it, and then they will participate more. I'm going to go to action step number 2. And action step number 2 is related to our technique 2. If you remember, our technique 2 was scaffolding, right? And our call to action here is think about which problem your students have and what you expect them to get from the reading. So, do my students have a reading problem? Do they have a language problem, or I want them to acquire new language? Or is it simply like what Jennifer just told us? We want to read about New Zealand. We want to learn about different cultures, geographies, countries. Maybe I want them to broaden their mind and learn something new. And in this case, when you do this, when you think about it, make sure that you design your activities. It can be a worksheet, it can be simply a guiding questions or a game, but make sure that you design them based on the purpose of the reading. So if it's a reading problem, think about reading strategies. If it's a language problem, do vocabulary activities, even do fill in the gaps with language in context, like not isolated language. And then if it's content, make fun activities about where they can tell you a story about what they read or find information, etc. And here I have a question for Pedro. Pedro, based on everything we talked about today, what we heard from Jennifer, what we heard from our teachers, what will you focus on in your next reading activity? Language or reading skills, and how?
Well, I think I'm going to focus on the reading skills because it's important to put in practice all the theory that you have give us this afternoon, and it's very very difficult for them to try to read in English. So the reading skills are important, are very very important for me, and I want to know more about that.
And which reading skills is the most problematic one for you and with your students?
Well, because maybe they don't like to read. I mentioned before, and we try to give some strategies. For example, to organize paragraphs and to try to identify expressions to begin a paragraph or expressions to conclude a paragraph. But they don't like to read, so it's difficult. I think I need to work more about that. Definitely.
Okay, so maybe what you could do are those questioning strategies. Maybe they would work. And then also, maybe you could work on web quests. Maybe you can ask them to look for information. And you can help them to notice vocabulary, as you said, those expressions, without making it explicit that it's a language activity. Maybe if they focus on content, they will be more interested to read. Thank you for sharing, Pedro. And then action step 3, this is the final one. So get ready. This one is make reading active. As long as reading is passive, students will not get engaged. So try to have collaborative activities, autonomous reading. Use readers online, such as the ones we showed on Echo. Try to make jigsaw activities and questioning. They can fill out mind maps. And this will make reading more active every day. Assign it, let them choose a text, look for information, and then bringing back to the classroom. Or give them a text that is already certain level of difficulty that they need, and get them to do that jigsaw where they read at home, and when they get to the classroom, they can all share. And you can also do it through a book club, which is also a good idea. And the final question, and here I want us also to interact with the audience. So which of the activities mentioned in our class, from everything that we've said and heard today from our teachers, what do you think would help enhance autonomous learning in your students? And do you have any other to share? So the hashtag here is sharing is caring. So let's share in the chat. And then I'm going to ask Jennifer. Jennifer, is there anything we said today that's actually useful for you? I know that you have lots of experience.
All of them, because now I was thinking of that. And so during my experience, I think I have tried to involve all these kinds of tools, but maybe they are not very effective, because maybe they need to be organized in order to be more scaffold, right? Scaffolded. So maybe my idea now, I like to share, for example, my maps when they need to read texts about topics about science or environment. And my maps for them is easier because they can organize the ideas and maybe create a critical thinking. I don't know, a person said, as I mentioned before. So maybe it's very important to organize your lesson plan when you focus on the reading comprehension in order to get the objective at the end of a student. And finally, in order to have autonomous students. It's simple enough, I think.
Very good.
Depends on that. Yes.
Excellent. Now, I want to ask Pedro something. I know that Pedro has had experience with Echo Kids, right? And using Echo materials in general. Pedro, could you give us some useful strategies that's related to what we said today that our teachers could use? Something to make our teaching easier?
Well, sometimes I prefer to talk about me. For example, I was living in the United States and I try to transmit or to talk to the students about traditions and about culture. So,
Excellent idea. Mhm.
yes, and they always try to discover what happened and what is the, for example, the tradition in Washington, in Boston, and I try to explain about based on my experience, right? And I try to
Mhm.
tell, for example, when I went to Boston, I discovered this, and they like to read, and sometimes I put ideas on the board, different topics, and they try to check readings about that. Okay.
Excellent idea. And you will notice, this is for all our teachers, that every obstacle becomes less of an obstacle and everything is less difficult when students are motivated. So if
Yes.
we can let them choose, if we can bring interesting content and scaffold it, it will all flow. Thank you, Pedro.
Yes.
Jonathan, do you want to add something?
Sometimes I show pictures about my journeys in United
Uh-huh.
States, and the students want or they motivate and they want to know more about that. And I say, okay, read about this place or read about this picture, for example. And it's good. It's good because they motivate. They motivate about that.
Excellent idea. And we want them to know that languages open the doors like to the world, to getting to know the cultures. And once we manage that, like they're motivated, everything is easier. Jonathan, do we have anything interesting on the chat? I'm sure we do for sharing this journey.
Very, yeah. You can see it in my face again. When I feel excited when I'm reading all the comments. I have, for example, Andrea Medellin Herrera. I'm not sure if it is the same Andrea Medellin from 2 weeks ago. We had a beautiful, amazing masterclass related to resources, and there was an Andrea Medellin. I don't know if that is the one, but she says, I like so much action step number 3. Thank you, Joanna, for this idea. Then
Thank you, Andrea.
we have Mari Morales, and she says, a good strategy is reading in context, and students could play in real time. Claudia Biafra, she says, it is necessary that our students read different types of text, narrative, report, informative. They are very excited, Joanna. We have a lot of comments. We have another one, for example, Lina Paola, I guess it is Lina Paola, and she says, hashtag sharing is caring, collaborating, and creating reading rubrics, Joanna.
I love
Reading
that.
rubrics.
So, such a
A
good
lot of
idea.
comments.
Such a
A
good
lot of
idea. Thank you for sharing, Jonathan. I would love to read all comments. I've been reading some of them on my cell phone. Very interesting. I'll read them after the class, all of them. And now I would like us to go to our final section for today because we're almost finishing. And the final section is going to be recap. We are going to
But
summarize everything.
sure. And Joanna, I have a question for you. Have you heard of eco teens? Something related to eco teens?
I have. Would you like to share information with us?
Let's share the information.
What is ECHO Teens? Well, ECHO stands for English for Colombia, and it is an educational radio program designed to promote English language learning while exploring different fields like technology, arts, tourism, and sports. The program is designed for teens and presented by teens, Rosita, Aleja, Ana, and Lucho together with Julian, their English teacher. In the program, they share their life projects and help other young people see the benefits of speaking English. Access other ECHO-Team resources at echo.colombiaaprende.edu.co or just click on the link in the description box below.
Okay, so we are back, and this is the final part before we go back to your questions. So let me remind you as we go now, finishing, please remember your question from the beginning of our masterclass and let us know whether we have answered them. And if not, pose them. And I'm going to recap. So What should we not forget from today's class? We had a big question today. The big question is how to enhance reading skills in teens through autonomous work. And we talked about 3 very specific techniques or strategies. The first one was choose wisely. And here we talked about level and age appropriate text. We said that we should check the text difficulty. We recommend Road to Grammar as a very useful tool. And then we also said find text that motivates students. 3rd graders are not motivated by the same thing as 11th graders, and 11th graders are not motivated by the same things as we are teachers because we are all much older, right? Unless you have a very young teacher. So bear this in mind. Scaffold reading skills, our technique number 2. And here we had pre, during, and post. And you can combine pre, during, post as autonomous and in-class activities. You can flip your classroom. So we said pre-teach vocabulary, raise interest in reading, do some predicting, some questioning before the reading. We said read actively, read with questions in mind, don't just take the text and read. And then we also recommended some extension activities such as discussions, opinions, reading comprehension. And this is where all of those reading strategies and critical thinking and high order thinking skills come in. And then finally, we said collaborate to connect. Very important to make reading a collaborative activity, which is also part of 21st century skills, right? We all like to develop that in our classrooms. So here we have collaborative reading, introduce graphic organizers, collaborative reading, web quests, and then also maybe organize a book club. Train them in questioning, ask them to find a text, different genres, as some of you mentioned, and then organize a book club inside your class. It doesn't even have to be extracurricular activities. And we hope that with these 3 techniques and specific steps and tips that we've given you, that it's going to be much more enjoyable to teach reading in your classrooms. And now I would like to ask you, did we answer the question you had at the beginning? And then if not, we're all ears and you can post it as my question. And I'm going to ask, while Jonathan, you pick up some of the questions on the chat. I'm going to ask Jennifer if we manage to answer her question.
And I have a challenge. I have a challenge for you, Joanna.
Wow,
What
let's
if
see.
what if we mention the teachers who participated with the first question? Can I say their names? Would you like to know their names
I would.
at the beginning? So we have Martín Castañeda, Teacher Boris, Salvador González, Leonardo Monroy, Luzmila Mora, Gladys Morales, Ligia Ortega, Wilton Cordova, and Angelica Maria. They were asking questions at the beginning. What if we invite them, and of course, everybody, all the teachers, to participate with the hashtag #MyQuestion? Is that
I
okay?
like that idea. That's a great idea.
Okay, let's do it.
So while we expect them to post, I'm going to ask Jennifer and Pedro whether we have already answered their question. Jennifer?
Yeah, totally. Because my question was how to encourage students to read read out of the classroom as a leisure activity. Totally, because first of all, it's important to choose wisely, scaffold for, and the last connect. Yes. So reading to connect. So it's very important to keep in mind these instructions in order to encourage students and engage students in reading activities and create autonomous students. And finally, we have a reading club. This is the most important activity I'm thinking of the future, right?
Thank you, Jennifer. And it's very interesting because you're already doing those activities with the books that you have. So I guess that it would be like a natural step forward and probably not very difficult for you since you already have the experience.
Actually, I'm gonna share my experience. Since last year, we started at school. Lesson plan is like the names of the project is Bookbuster.
Wow.
And the idea is to read books. The idea is at the end, the objective for students and for us is our students can read at least 2 books a year. It's a little, but step by step, this is our objective and aim for the future.
I wouldn't say that it's little because it's actually a smart goal, right? It's very specific. it's feasible. It's something that, because if you tell them read 10 books, nobody will read 10 books. But if you tell them, okay, read 2 books, this is something they can actually do. So that sounds like a great idea.
Thank you.
And Pedro, how about you?
Well, I think you answered my question because, for example, you gave me a game about the dice. It was an excellent idea to try to improve reading skills of the students because sometimes they don't like or they don't understand the vocabulary. So if we have a game like the dice game, it's excellent to try to improve reading skills. Thank you for answering me my question.
Okay, I'm glad that we did manage to answer it. You can also change the questions on the dice game. You can put different questions. You keep the game as such, and then you change it based on the purpose of your activity. Okay, Jonathan, what do we have on the chat? I'm reading here, but I'm slow.
No, don't worry. It's okay. That's okay. We have some very good questions, and I want to ask you the first one. That is from Elkin Humberto Lopez, and he says, how to prepare our students of 11th grade for Saber 11 in reading comprehension?
That's a really good question. So you know that, well, of course, you have Be the One Challenge, which is something we always like to promote because it is such a useful app. But then also you will find activities on Echo, so you can look for them there. And then if you want to do it in your classroom, you can use pre, during, and post reading strategies. So start with something simple, such as vocabulary. This will help you work with sections 1 to 4 of the test Saber 11. And then the most difficult parts would be probably from 4 and on. And then these parts, which actually have reading skills and inferences, etc., you can work on that by designing, for example, worksheets, such as the one we're going to share with you after this class. So design worksheets that ask students to read with questions in mind. So ask them, for example, questions before the reading, and then tell them, now read the text and check if this is correct. Don't do it the other way around. We usually give them a text, right? And then we say, okay, now answer the questions. This is maybe not the best way. Give them the questions before the text and then tell them, read the text and check if it's correct. Then as you do that, because Saber 11 is actually a very good standardized test because it tests communicative skills. It doesn't matter that it's not speaking, it tests communication and assesses it in students. So if you work like this and if you follow this model, your students will be developing those skills.
Okay. Joanna, can I share with you 2 things? Number 1, a very positive comment by Gladys Morales, and she said, I loved this masterclass. Thank you, Giovanna, for your support and for sharing all these techniques with us. That's number 1, Giovanna. Number 2, I want to make a contrast with Professor Ligia Ortega Rosero, because at the beginning, when we were starting, she said, how can we improve in reading in our students? And now that we are finishing your masterclass, Ligia Ortega says the following. She says, reading is an excellent way to learn a foreign language. So if we select good strategies to it, I think our students will be motivated all the time, Joanna. So the answer is yes. You answered her question. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank both of the teachers. I want to thank Gladys for being so participative on our chat, and all of our teachers. And especially I want to thank Jennifer and Pedro. I know that our teachers are very busy, but they were here with us today to share their knowledge. And I hope that they enjoyed it.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So that's the end of our masterclass for today, Jonathan.
Yes, it is the end. It was wonderful. Very positive comments. But before we finish, we want to invite all the teachers for our next masterclass next Thursday. That is going to be for primary school teachers. But of course, you are all invited. And the name of the masterclass will be Cómo motivar la confianza y gestionar las emociones durante las interacciones orales en clase de inglés. It is going to be a wonderful and amazing masterclass. All of you are invited. from the Ministry of Education and from the British Council, we want to invite you all to come to our next masterclass this coming Thursday. Joanna, thank you very much. Dear teachers, it was a pleasure to be with you today, Joanna.
Jonathan, I don't know if our teachers, maybe Jennifer and Pedro, have a message for our audience, something
Okay.
they want to share for the end.
Okay, so I think we, as a public English teacher, is a challenge every day when we work in our class and we try to do the best. And when we receive these kinds of strategies in order to improve our performance in English, and this, in English as an English teachers, as an English teacher, it's so very important to motivate students in order to improve, not only for an effects test, but to communicate their feelings and create critical thinking and promote creativity, innovation, and thinking.
Thank you,
Thank
Jennifer.
you.
I
Nice.
always say that the future depends on our teachers in the public sector, because you have 45 students in the classroom every single day, and all of those kids will grow up, and what they learn with you is something they'll need in life. So I really hope that these kind of strategies help at least a little bit. And Pedro, any message for our audience?
Okay, I would like to say that this masterclass was very interesting because motivation in the first step is important to students. If you motivate the students, teachers, you can develop different activities, especially, for example, checking vocabulary, checking ideas, expressions. So motivation is the most important in class, and try to use different strategies. For example, try to show pictures, try to talk about culture, traditions, culture in general, right? And try to show globalization, environment, those kind of topics, and the students maybe can motivate to read.
Thank you,
Okay,
Pedro.
Joanna and Pedro, thank you very much. And before we finish, two more things. Number one, remember for the teachers who were talking about Prueba Saber, remember that you can participate in Evaluar para
Para
Avanzar.
avanzar, yes.
Be part of that strategy because it's perfect for Prueba Saber. That's
It's a
the
good
coming number
strategy.
one. It is, Professor
Yeah.
Pedro. And then we have Gladys, and no, I think it was Orjuela, the teacher Orjuela, and she said, are all the classes for primary teachers in Spanish? The answer is yes, dear teachers. The answer is yes. All the classes for primary teachers are in Spanish. The next master class, the following Thursday, is going to be in Spanish. So thank you very much for your answers, for your questions, for your participation. It was a wonderful master class. Joanna and teachers, go to the chat and read all the beautiful messages that you have. Okay.
We will.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye
Okay,
bye.
goodbye.